Hello, boys and girls, and we are going to continue today with adding fractions, just like we did yesterday with the composing and decomposing fractions. But today we're going to just focus on adding fractions with what I would call common denominators, meaning the denominators are the same. And I want you to keep that in your back of your head when you're doing this. The denominators never will change, they will always stay the same, okay? So let's jump right into our first problem. It says Megan is working on a community mural. She paints 3/8 of her wall in green and 4/8 in purple. How much of the wall has she painted so far? So we've been using fraction strips to model equivalent fractions, but you can also use those fraction strips to help you with adding. We're going to look at using fraction strips to help us add and then not using them so that you can see both ways. But if I look at the cubes in this problem, she's painted 3/8 green, 4/8 purple. It doesn't matter the two different colors because the question they're asking is how much of the wall has she painted so far. So there's some of our key words, okay? Doesn't mean the whole wall is painted just yet, but they want to know how much the green and the purple are covering together, okay? So let's take a look at our next one here. So if we wanted to use fraction strips, so if you had your fraction strips in front of you, and they are on the back of your practice sheet, if you want to do this with me, Megan is working on a community mural, okay? So she's done her 3/8, okay? She's done her 3/8 and she's done her 4/8, and they want to know how much that wall she painted so far. So because our denominators are eighths, we probably would want to use our eighths fraction strips, just like we see down here at the bottom of the screen, okay? And then what you would do is we know she's done 3/8 and 4/8. So I have 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, and there's my 4/8 of purple, and then I will do my 3/8 of green. 1, 2, and 3. Now I go back and I look and I say, okay, so I've shaded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of that wall is painted so far, okay? And all I did was I just kept adding. So I started with a certain number of tiles, say the 4/8, and then you add however many tiles are in the other fraction. And I want you, I'm not going to give you the answer just yet. I want you to look at what part of the fraction I used to help me with that, to figure out how many fraction strips, okay? We're going to look at another problem. Let's jump over to this screen here. We have Mark is baking banana bread and muffins for our neighborhood street party. He uses 2/5 of a bag of walnuts for the banana bread and 1/5 of a bag for the muffins. How much of the bag of walnuts does Mark use all together? So he has one bag of walnuts that he's using for two different recipes. Okay. And I'm going to write this off to the side here. And I'm not going to use my fraction strips just yet. Because remember on the last screen, I said I wanted you to think what part of the fraction was I using to help me. At the beginning of the lesson, I said the denominators will never change. So in this case, my denominators are 5. So my final answer should end with a denominator of 5. Okay, so knowing that he's using this part of the bag for walnuts, this part of the bag for the muffins, they want to know how much of that bag did he use for those two recipes together. Okay, so I'm going to take, and because I'm putting two things together, we know we're going to add. So I'm going to take my 1/5, I'm going to add my 2/5. I'm going to say 1 plus 2 is 3. And I told you my denominators stay the same. So he used 3/5 of that bag of walnuts to make those two recipes. And I want you to be thinking about this. What part of the fraction am I actually adding? And if you guessed correctly, I am adding just the numerators. So I only look at what the numerators are. I add those across to get my 3, and then my denominator just stays the same. So if we look at our next screen, is there a rule that we can state that is going to work in general for adding fractions? And it's yes. You add the numerators and the denominators stay the same. That's the biggest thing you need to remember with adding these fractions, okay? All right, you'll have two practice problems on your practice sheet tonight. You can use the fraction strips on the back of the sheet if you would like, if that's easier. Or like I said, you can work on just adding those numerators, but just make sure those denominators stay the same. Don't get caught adding the denominators as well. Thank you, boys and girls.